Hello, this is Wes from PC Gamer, and I'm joined by my colleague Austin Wood from Games Radar. How's it going, Austin?
It's going good.
We've got something pretty exciting to talk about today, which is we've played Elden Ring.
Yeah, it was just a couple days, but there was a lot to see.
Let's go through a couple little details that we noticed that were new in Elden Ring that weren't in any of the Dark Souls games. Elden Ring has checkpoints now?
Yeah, because like the Sites of Grace and like the bonfires previously were always basically stand-in checkpoints and teleport points, but now they're just like literally just checkpoints where these stakes of Marika are just kind of scattered around, usually somewhat before bosses or like tough areas it feels like, and they just kind of trigger automatically when you pass them, and if you die, you get the choice. You can either spawn at the closest Site of Grace, or the last one you rested at, I guess, or the closest stake of Marika, and it's generally correct, or like I generally chose to just respawn at the closest stake because it's going to be closer, and I'm going to get, I've died, so I'm going to get my flasks back and whatever. I just care more about getting my runes back that I've lost. But there is like still sort of a choice, because let's say you're just like totally undergeared or poorly equipped to deal with whatever killed you. You might want to go back to a Site of Grace instead so that you can rest and kind of re-gear and things like that, which you can't do at a Stake of Marika. It's just a respawn point. But like having that sort of like mid-level save almost for like dungeons and things is really nice in a lot of cases.
It seems like they did some things with this game where they're trying to design it to get you to keep playing without constantly like using the fast travel system to just jump back to a checkpoint all of the time. So like another new thing they've done is they've added in a system where when you kill a group of enemies, and this is sort of a vague concept, right? A group could be, I feel like sometimes it's just one guy, but sometimes it's like a kind of tough guy and like his lackeys that are extremely easy to kill. You get a flask charge back.
And it's like depending on the strength, like how difficult the enemy was. Like if you kill one of the big giants, you get like 2 crimson flasks back and 1 cerulean, like 1 HP and FP thing. Yeah, it's just kind of like air quotes this cluster of enemies.
Yeah, and then another one that you noted down, we have infinite stamina now outside of combat. So you can just run, and like, granted, you're probably going to want to get on your steed a lot of times if you're traveling longer distances, but it's really nice to just be able to run for a few seconds without having to worry about it.
Yeah, like you never run and then like round a corner and there's a bunch of dudes there and you just got no stamina because you were sprinting around. Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a lot of this game has been adapted from the sort of traditional Dark Souls From Software formula to better suit this open world structure. Like you can just jump all the time now, which lets you access a lot of different paths. You can do jump attacks.
Jump button. So great.
Yeah, like this very innovative video game mechanic, the jump button. We finally got one.
It only took 40 years or so.
And like it feels right in this world, right? You can see the paths, you can see stuff you want to jump to.
Yeah, in terms of the open world being less punishing or more forgiving to the player, there is still fall damage, but it is nothing like the fall damage in previous Souls games, which is like, oops, you fell 12 feet off a ledge and you're dead.
Yeah. Like there's very clearly like cliffs and precipices where you're just gonna die if you fall there, but in general there's a lot of places where you can just take a leap of faith if you have a little bit of health, and just like you can just dust yourself off when you land because you'll be pretty okay. Like it's much more forgiving, which again is I think kind of From Software actively sort of giving players a pat on the back of like, hey, you can go down here, sort of encouraging players like, maybe I can just get down there if I try and fall very carefully on these little rocks or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like there have always been arguments about the difficulty of the Dark Souls games and whether they should have, difficulty options and that kind of thing. And I'm sure that will continue with Elden Ring, and it will be exhausting. But I think this game is threading a very careful line between, in a lot of ways, they are making it easier, but it's all in ways that are like giving the player way more tools and way more power than it is like making enemies, take fewer hits to kill, or, dumbing down their AI or things like that. It's really all about just giving you way more options for how you navigate the world and how you navigate battles. which is, I think, is going to be pretty nuts to see scaled over, I don't know, an 80-hour game, a 50-hour game, considering how much was packed into just, the bits of it that we got to play already.
Yeah, I mean, I can't begin to imagine the array of weapons and spells and like boss weapons, hopefully things like that we'll find throughout the whole game. Given how many different things we've encountered in this little area. Because I mean, From Software raised repeatedly in the past couple of months in interviews and videos and stuff was like, this game will probably be about as difficult as Dark Souls 3, but you have way more options just in terms of like things we associate with a more traditional RPG to customize your character and your playstyle and your way of approach. That there's more ways to kind of overcome these challenges, and like it is definitely going to be a hard game, but the variety of like build types and playstyles and like approaches that you have in Elden Ring already is like, I would say, head and shoulders above all the previous, From Software action RPGs. There's so many powerful like spells and tools already that are just very readily available. Like when you just start off, you can just there's a merchant like a couple like feet basically ahead of where you start the game who sells those phantoms. He sells 2 phantoms you can summon in combat. It's like a little pack of wolves and some like mage guy, and even those 2 little guys like are very helpful in just regular fights or in boss fights.
Yeah, so they're like exploding out that system they had in the old Souls games, where when you get to a boss fight, you might be able to summon Solaire or some other NPC. Right? They're kind of giving you a whole like library of these summons you're going to build up and use at will.
Yeah, you just have them like on tap now. It's like Pokemon. They're just collectibles in your inventory.
Elden Ring is Pokemon now. Yeah.
Yeah, like you just imagine always having like your Solaire summon just like on demand, basically. There is like one limitation where you have to be near this certain type of like statue stake thing in the ground, but they're all over the place. So.
Yeah, another thing that you were making ample use of in your time playing the game was the new, I think they call them guard counters. Is that the official name of the system?
Yeah, I think it's either guard counter or counter guard. I'm pretty sure it's guard counter. And like, it's so interesting after the last couple of games that From Software's put out, because like we had, I think, Bloodborne, then Dark Souls 3, then Sekiro. Like Sekiro's the most recent one, and it felt like compared to the earlier Souls games, they were generally trending away from just like the kind of turtling, blocking, and like retaliating playstyle.
Right, they were trying to push you to be more aggressive, attack,
like
dodge.
Bloodborne. Yeah, you just like, you don't have shields. Sekiro, you don't have shields. You have to like learn to parry and dodge and play more aggressively. But with this, like I think with the one, shields are really strong now. They block a lot of damage and incoming damage and everything. But yeah, the guard counter, all you do is you block an attack. You do a heavy attack immediately afterward, and you do just this very hard-hitting, staggering counter move, which does a lot of poise damage and will very regularly just like instantly knock down enemies, and you can hit them like you would after parrying with like a riposte or whatever. And like it is so easy to just bait an attack, block it, do a counter guard, just like over and over and over again. You can just chew through like just like this flood of guys. I remember there's like 12 like enemy soldiers in this one area. You can literally aggro all of them and just counter guard them into pieces.
One at
like
a time.
It's like effortless.
Knock them down, and it's way less risky than a parry, right? Because
like it's not as effective as a parry. You don't deal as much critical damage afterward, but it's like there's no risk. You can't fail basically as long as your shield and your stamina bar can take the hit. You can just guard counter almost everything, and that like including bosses, right? Like it's very powerful against some of the bosses that have like fast flurry kind of combos. You can just absorb the whole thing, and then after the last hit, do a guard counter for some cheap damage.
Right. I think knowing when to use it is where the challenge, or like where the risk comes in, because it doesn't make you, so when you're parrying, you're like effectively invincible for those frames, right? Another enemy can't hit you. With the guard counter, you do not get that invincibility. So if you try to use it on a boss and you try to guard an attack while he's, mid combo or whatever, and do your follow-up swing, you might hit him, but he's still gonna hit you at the same time unless you get really lucky and manage to stagger them.
Yeah, and there's definitely like,
I'm sure there's bosses that don't stagger, right?
Yeah, there's still like an element of risk and skill to it where you have to know, okay, I've taken X amount of hits, how much stamina do I have left? Can this attack even be blocked to begin with? Because there are definitely unblockable attacks. And also, like you said, like, okay, do I now have a window to land a guard counter? Like, is the enemy close enough? Is he going to keep attacking? Am I going to get hit the second I try and? Because when you do the guard counter, obviously you lower your shield, right? So you're opening
Right.
yourself up. Whereas with the parry, you get the clean iframes. You're immune during like the whole animation, and you do more damage. So it's definitely kind of like on, I guess, like a higher level or more difficult like strategy. But just as a general, defensive play style where you're just really picking your moments, I think the guard counter is just a really huge, quietly massive addition to this game's combat.
Yeah, I kind of didn't even think to use it that much initially because I had a shield that did 90 something percent block damage. So I was like, okay, well, I can pretty safely block an attack when I want to block or dodge when I want to dodge, and wasn't making full use of that parry. But I think people who tend to play sword and board type characters are
Yeah.
this is going to be their new best friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we've got a couple other new systems here, like jump attacks. That wasn't really a thing in the old Souls games, but sort of like Sekiro, you can just jump up in the air and then swing your sword or your axe or whatever you're using.
Yeah, some of the jump attacks have a lot of really nice reach, and they seem to hit like pretty hard in terms of poise. Like it's good for breaking a guard if someone's just like if there's an enemy kind of turtling you to death. But I remember specifically there was that troll boss in the mine who just has a really awkward hitbox. His legs are kind of hard to hit, and if you lock onto him, your character aims upward a little bit, and you often miss. But if you just do a jump attack, you can pretty consistently hit his torso, kind of. So there's like very subtle uses and benefits to jump attacking, which is nice.
And I guess the troll skipped leg day, which is another takeaway. So skinny.
Yeah, he's just been sitting on his gold all day.
Skinny leg bosses, you gotta jump attack those guys. We've also got stealth kills, which is kind of another thing that just feels lifted straight from Sekiro, basically.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Elden Ring is sort of the greatest hits of From Software, and that was something that just kind of works in this more open structure. And it's so funny to me to have like these sort of characters with like the silhouettes and aesthetics we associate with all this gothic Dark Souls like art and everything, and like the knights in shining armor just like skulking through bushes and stabbing dudes in the dark.
They're not really shooting for like realism or immersion in those
Yeah, like you're just a dude doing whatever they can.
Another thing, we've got mounted combat while you're riding your steed.
Yeah, that was. I think we and you talked about this briefly before, and like it feels like very hit and miss. I think when it hits, when it's fun, it's very fun. I have really fond memories of like running up on basically anyone who's not on a horse. If you're on your horse, you can just kind of destroy them over time.
Yeah,
they really can't hit you a lot of the time.
They can't do much to you. Yeah.
Yeah, like you can just drive by repeatedly and just hit them, and they just really kind of stand there. But like it's fun to kind of lean over to one side with like your foot deep in the stirrups and drag your sword on the ground and just at the last minute like just get this big heavy attack in. But if you try to be more aggressive on your horse, you just kind of flail around a lot.
Yeah. I guess like regular Souls combat, I don't know, I feel like the way movement and stuff on the horse it feels like you should be able to attack a little bit more quickly or a little bit more like loosely, like it should have like a more forgiving hitbox or something, but it really doesn't. So if you're using like a greatsword or something, you're like swinging and then there's like a pretty long window after you've pressed the button where your sword is like actually going to the place where it's going to hit an enemy. So I definitely had the experience a lot of times of like swinging and then about a second after I had ridden past the target, my guy just kind of swinging at empty air and being like, well, that looked dumb.
Yeah, there's definitely like a totally different kind of learning curve for timing it. I started to approach it basically like jousting, where I would just run toward the enemies, charge up an attack, land it at the right time, and just drive straight by them, hang a U-turn, and do it again, basically. And that like was more consistent for me, and honestly pretty fun. I think your mileage will definitely vary depending on what weapon you're using. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the horseman bosses we've seen so far, I think there's like the one official horseman boss at the start, and there's one more sort of mini boss on a bridge. they all use halberds, which have incredible reach,
Yeah.
which are good for horseback.
They're like the same size as the horse.
Yeah, like they thought ahead, and we're just kind of out here swinging whatever we have.
One thing I did really appreciate about it, though, which kind of surprised me, is you can also still use your like magic spells, like a catalyst, on horseback, and I just didn't expect that to work. I guess I figured you'd have to use, a melee weapon, but it'll totally let you use spells from horseback too, so that's pretty rad.
Yeah, and like if you thought just using magic from range was like unfair, like imagine just riding circles on your horse around these dudes, just pelting them with magic, and they can't even get close to you.
I think we also saw a fight that was probably a prelude to something that will be, throughout Elden Ring, which is there are definitely bosses that are designed for you to fight on horseback. You don't have to, but there's a dragon that swoops down to this swampy area, and you could fight him on foot, but it really seems like they want you to fight him on horseback.
Yeah, it's so funny because when they showed that guy in the gameplay trailer, the dragon, like the player we're watching, starts on horseback and is doing fine against the dragon, gets off the horse and gets smacked around, and then like the next cutaway, they're back on the horse. Like they figured it out. You definitely want to be on the horse to fight that, and that was a really different and fun fight. It felt like fighting like something out of Monster Hunter with these big telegraphed wing and tail and breath attacks, and doing it on your horse is a lot of fun because it's very fast, like you're very, very mobile.
Yeah, you feel like you if you didn't get out of the way in time, it wasn't because like you didn't have time to run away because your character was too slow. It was because you didn't, read the attack right and steer your steed where you needed to be to not get hit by that giant tail.
Yeah, and that's one of the enemies I think that makes the mounted combat really sing a bit more, because it's with something this big and imposing, it's like we need to be on a horse for this. Like I can't imagine not having the mount in this game and there being bosses like this. It feels like a much better match than just like some dudes in a field that you could just fight on your own.
Now, one of the other new-ish systems are the weapon ashes. So this is basically a return to the weapon arts from Dark Souls 3, except the weapon skills are no longer locked to a weapon, right? It's like it's an item that you then attach to a particular weapon to change its sort of special move. And this feels like the thing that you were kind of referencing earlier in terms of a lot more like freedom, variety of build options in Elden Ring. These things, along with the way they changed up some of the basic stats, really feel like they just break wide open the way people would typically play Dark Souls games, which is like picking your, kind of probably two stats that you prioritize, your strength and dex, or like faith and dex, or strength and endurance, or whatever. And like it kind of feels like they want you by the end of this game to be maybe not a master of everything, but certainly a master of more than just one particular style of play.
Yeah, like the crazy thing about the Ashes is that it has totally cracked open the weapon skill system. Like you said, we had in Dark Souls 3, we can just kind of put, like some weapons I have found have locked weapon skills, but you can just
kind of like special
ones,
ones, right, that feel kind of more narratively designed.
Yeah, but and like on top of that, it's also completely replaced. So far at least, it's completely replaced the sort of branching Titanite upgrade paths we had for weapons before, right? Where you would, like if I wanted to make a magic longsword, I would get it to like a certain level, find the right ember, bring like magic Titanite or whatever it was called to the blacksmith, and then this sword is now on like the magic upgrade path, right? And I have to get a whole bunch more of that type of magic stone to upgrade it. Whereas now, you just find of Ash of War that applies or gives your weapon magic damage, right? Like I found two magic ashes that I could use on my longsword. Both of them gave them like physical and magic damage, and the magic damage would scale off my intelligence. And because I had two, I had an option of different weapon skills. Like one of them was this big, like summoned blue greatsword, and the other would spawn these little homing little like sword turrets almost.
Magic missile kind of deal.
Yeah.
And I think this is a huge change, because if you're not like a extremely efficient, Dark Souls speedrunner, in most of those games, especially when you're talking about magic or some of the other like advanced like infusion types or weapons, like, you know, making your weapon do poison damage or bleeding or something like that, you usually had to wait till pretty deep into those games before you start getting to those resources, right? It's just like, well, if I want to be a mage who also uses like a magic sword, it's going to take 15-20 hours before I get the item that lets me do that. And this is like, again, going back to if you have learned this opening area that you started in the way Austin did, if you roll a new character, within 15 minutes you could have that weapon ash potentially.
Yeah, like it's kind of nutty how quickly you can get a build put together if you know sort of where you're going, where you need to go shopping in this world, right? And yeah, it is wild that even in the very beginner area, we have access to all of this lightning damage weapons, these magic damage weapons. And, you know, you start with like maybe like an 80 attack rating weapon or something, just like your basic spear, sword, whatever you have to start. And within well under an hour, just from doing some basic exploring, you hit basically double that, right? Of like 120, 150 attack rating, because you've added in, you know, this other type of scaling damage, which is going to play with whatever your like starting class is. If you have like high base faith or high base intelligence, things like that, like builds come together a lot faster. And because you can mix and match all these ashes of war and everything, and it doesn't look like you have to, you know, keep re-upgrading weapons or anything. You just kind of like +1, +2, +3, then whatever.
Yeah.
And then you can just change their damage type. Like I think there's going to be a ton of build variety, and also like, okay, like I'm usually a magic build, but this boss is clearly heavily, you know, resistant to magic damage. I've got that lightning ash of war sitting around gathering dust. You know, I can just slap that on and it'll work just fine for this one thing I need it for.
Yeah, and I think if you're exploring the world, which if you're playing this game, I assume you're doing, you're going to start running into just like finding magic spells or finding weapon ashes, finding things that, you know, you maybe wouldn't have bought from a shopkeeper in a typical Souls game. Like, okay, in a Souls game, you find the NPC who like sells all the pyromancies or sells, you know, a bunch of sorceries or whatever, but you're like, well, I'm a strength character, I'm not going to spend my souls on those. Well, in this game, you're going to just find a bunch of that shit anyway. Maybe you're looking for something else, but you end up with it. And I think that's going to encourage a lot more of this experimentation, because you don't really have anything to lose. You know, you have such an easy way to kind of convert the way your damage scales that like you might as well try out some of this other stuff.
And there are so many things with magic now that like I can't imagine playing this game without magic of some kind. Like I played tons of just straight up beefcake characters in previous Souls games where all I needed was a big sword, right? That was all I needed to do.
Sword arm so swole.
Yeah, like but magic is so powerful in Elden Ring that not having just at least a couple of like ranged attacks or AoE attacks or something, like, and it wouldn't be hard to fit into your build, right? Like I think everyone's gonna want a little bit of that. It almost feels mandatory. It's that good.
Yeah, and when I was playing a primarily faith character, I was also putting some points into strength to just whack stuff with a giant club that you start with. But I was mostly using the faith abilities, and they seemed to do a lot more damage to enemies in general, even when I was putting points into strength. I'm sure there are going to be the enemies you run into out in the world who are just like have way higher magic defense, right? And then it'll be like, oh shit, you know, I need to pull the club out. But I think like you say, like if you're playing this game and you think, well, typically I'd never mess with the magic systems because whatever, I like my sword or my great axe or whatever, I think this is going to be the game to break that habit of you. And I think you will have a lot more fun if you embrace kind of, I guess, multi-classing, for lack of a better word, in Souls.
Yeah, basically. I think, like you said earlier, like we're kind of getting steered in this direction of like a bit of a master of all trades to some extent, where you can have your main focus stats, like this is what I'm built around, but it's just much easier. Like magic is so accessible that it's a lot easier to kind of splash it in for just a little range support or just a little utility, and it makes a world of difference. Especially like if you're just pure physical damage, right? There are going to be some bosses. There's one in the demo, that big troll boss. He's very physical resistant, but magic just annihilates him. Like, so you can either repeatedly whack away at his legs with your basic like battle axe or club or whatever you have, or stand back at a safe distance and just shred him with basic magic.
And feel very good about yourself.
Yeah, like it's so strong.
So I think we've touched on most of the new ability empowerment stuff, and pretty much everything from prior Dark Souls games in terms of what you how your character works is still there. Like you can still parry, you can still use light attacks and heavy attacks, you can still switch to two-handed, with a weapon. Like that stuff's all the same.
With all these new RPG elements and sort of the open world appeal that people who have either missed or just intentionally avoided all this From Software hype for the past decade or so, I hope that some of those people can find something they like here and kind of get into the series through that.
Yeah, it does feel like the From Software game that if you bounced off some particular aspect of their prior games, this could be the one that hooks you because you have so much more freedom in how you approach it. And it's so much more player empowering, I think, than those previous games were. So I think there's probably going to be a little something for everybody in here, unless you really love your like narrative-based quests. In which case, there's not going to be much of that. There's not too many people to talk to. Nobody's telling you who to go save because everybody's dead or undead or just generally bummed out.
Yeah.
And that's Elden Ring. So
basically, that's what it's been so
far. The full game is out at the end of February, and I don't know, hopefully we get a chance to play some more of it before then. We don't know if they're going to do more than one network test or just the one, but we'll see. Yeah. February's not too far away.